What's up, guys? So today we're talking about my experience using melatonin. Now, I've been using melatonin for 2 to 4 years now, and I want to get off it. And last night, actually, I had a good sleep without the melatonin. So I want to go through my experiences and why you should or shouldn't take melatonin. So the reason why I started using melatonin in the first place was because there was a whole several weeks of me only getting 3 hours of sleep per night, to where I would toss and turn in bed. I'd need to go for a waz before I went to bed, or I'll just be sitting there with my thoughts, thinking and doing nothing and staying in bed for hours and hours and hours on end, to where my mind wouldn't even shut down properly. And so I resorted to a lot of things such as the military method and reading before sleep and having more tetracaffeine, which is found in milk or turkey, and none of that helped until I got melatonin. And this is the melatonin that I use. It's 3 milligrams per pill. It lasted me a really long time because I've read online that the dosage you need for melatonin to actually help is 0.3 milligrams, but each pill of these have 3 milligrams, so I'll dose my pills, so that's why it's lasted almost triple the amount of time that I usually do. So, with that in mind, with a small doses of 0.3 milligrams of melatonin, I was actually able to get sleep. I could actually rest easy. And the thing about it is, I would wake up drowsy for weird reasons. I would have a lot of dreams. Melatonin does make you dream a lot, but there's a trade-off between getting quality sleep and having less quantity. So that's the first problem I encountered. I'd still be drowsy, my sleep would be high quality, but I would get less overall. But at least I was getting more sleep than when I did over that phase. So that's one thing you have to keep in mind. And that was a honeymoon phase where I dreamed a lot, I actually got sleep, but then psychologically, something went wrong. On the nights that I would take melatonin, I knew I was going to get a good sleep, at least 7 hours of sleep. However, on nights where I didn't take it, that's when my mind was psychologically like, oh, I haven't taken melatonin, I'm not going to sleep, and then I didn't sleep. So I began to rely upon melatonin every single night for me to sleep, which is a big problem because Mum's talked to me about melatonin dependence, which is where you take external melatonin, and because you take it for so long, your body begins to adapt to that by not producing its own melatonin because it's knows it's going to get melatonin from outside source. But also psychologically, this is a warning to where it's like your brain gets so used to it that it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to have melatonin, I'm not going to be able to sleep. So that's the first problem that I had with it. That's when the honeymoon phase was kind of over, to where I actually had to take it every night, or else I feel like I wasn't going to sleep, or I wasn't going to sleep. And then more problems started happening where I'd wake up after 4 hours in the middle of the night, and I wouldn't be able to go back to sleep after that. And so to get back to sleep, I would take melatonin when and so for me to get back to sleep, I would take more melatonin so I could go back to sleep, which is extremely bad, and it messed with my circadian rhythm, and I would wake up all drowsy. But since I got 8 hours, 8 to 9 hours of sleep, then I would have to force myself to get up. So it messed with my circadian rhythm a lot and make me feel worse than if I hadn't taken that, if that makes sense. And then it got to a point to where I would take melatonin before my sleep, but then I wouldn't sleep. So then I would take more melatonin, and then I would sleep, and then I would wake up in the middle of the night, wouldn't be able to go back to sleep, so I'd take more melatonin, and then I would go back to sleep. So I was taking 3 doses of melatonin a night, which is extremely bad and really stressed me out physically and psychologically and mentally. It's like, I'm gonna be after, if this keeps going on, I'm gonna have to take so much more melatonin every single night just to be able to sleep. And so that's the scary part. That's where the scary part got in for me, to where it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to stop taking melatonin. And so to phase melatonin out so far, I've had to be really, really tight on my sleep. And what I mean by that is I've had to literally not force myself to sleep. So if I'm up, then I'm up. But as soon as I get drowsy or sleepy naturally, then that's when I go to bed. I don't force myself to stay up, otherwise the phase of me sleeping is over and I won't be able to get my sleep in within that time frame. And it feels way better. It feels way more natural for me, to where as soon as I'm sleepy or my eyes get drowsy naturally, then I just go to sleep. And it worked last night. Last night I did that and I got around 8 to 10 hours of sleep naturally, which is basically unheard of for me without taking melatonin. And yeah, it's a good feeling getting 8 to 10 hours of sleep naturally, because I haven't had that in years, or even a decade even. And so what I think you need to do is, I think you need to find your circadian rhythm, or just sleep when you know, like when your body's literally shutting down, when your eyes are shutting down, and don't force yourself to stay up, but don't force yourself to sleep, because that's the sweet spot of when you can and when you need to sleep, and everything will just fall in place. And so, would I consider taking melatonin worth it? I would consider taking melatonin with it, but only when you really, really absolutely need it. When you've had a couple of nights where you just don't get enough sleep, then you take some melatonin, but you don't rely upon it every night. Use it more as like a medicine, where you dose yourself when you're sick, or like when you definitely need it. Use it in that, but not something you do every day. Otherwise, bad things are going to happen. But that's just my experience. This is not medical advice, and thanks for watching.